Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. Really appreciate you taking some time to be here tonight. Just a quick introduction. My name is Tim Stemple. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, certified life coach, and I also have an MBA from the Rady School of Management at UCSD. And so where I sit on campus is actually in the Student Health Center. I'm our behavioral health program manager there. So very nice to meet you all. In terms of kind of expectations for tonight, you're more than welcome to leave your videos off. You can come on video if you're comfortable with that. Either way is totally fine. I am going to ask you throughout the time to do some participation in the chat. So if you would please be so kind as to um, kind of when you're asked, be involved and kind of say some things in the chat if you have something to say. If you do want to speak at any point, we're just going to ask that you raise your hand in the using the Zoom function of hand raising, and then either Ron or I are going to call on you. Like he said, he's going to be helping me sort of manage the chat and the hand raising. So, yeah, so that's kind of some of the expectations. And then at that time, at the end of the time, we're going to have some time for Q&A. Yeah, and so I hope that, there's been four of these career series. I hope that you've had a chance to come to some of them and really some of the really wonderful information, the content that's been shared through these presentations. Tonight, specifically, we're talking about mental health related things and specifically mental resilience and well-being. And yeah, and so I hope that you can take some things away from this tonight as well. So, uh, shoot. Um, Dang, I don't remember what I was going to say next. Uh, wow. I can't believe I'm going blank like this. Wow, dude, what an idiot. Who might do this? Like, what kind of how did I think that I was going to do this well at all? I can't believe I'm doing this. These people here, how many people we got? 16 people going to think I'm a total moron? Wow, I should never have signed up to do this. They're never inviting me back. What are these people going to think of me? I just told them where I work on campus. I can't believe this. Wow. I don't even know where to go from here. What do I say? What do I say? What was I going to say? What was I going to say? And we'll cut there. So, does that feel familiar to anybody? Anybody had an experience like that of a voice in their head, some messages coming through? I'm curious if that feels familiar to you at all, anything like that that you've ever had that experience. Give me something in the chat, a thumbs up, 100, a +1. I'm just curious if that felt at all familiar at some time when you felt some distress like that, that maybe got some messages that were not very favorable. Ron, yes, thank you. Anybody else ever feel anything like that? Okay, awesome. I see one or two there. So that may be the case that some of you have this voice that says some things that maybe aren't super kind when we're feeling distressed, we're feeling upset. Uh, for those of you who maybe didn't notice a voice in the past, maybe you even heard something saying, "What's wrong with this guy?" or "What's going on?" or "This feels uncomfortable," right? Like, what is happening here? And so, some of the things that we're going to be talking through tonight are ways that we can manage the messages that are going on in our head, because what you're embarking on as you graduate from this institution and looking into the career field and looking for a job can be really difficult. It can be really challenging. It can be very distressing, and it can be really an emotional roller coaster. And so, some of the things we're talking through tonight are really ways that I hope that you can take away some practical tools for managing some of that stuff. So that brings me to our next slide here, which is just kind of wondering about, why is my brain saying these things to me? What's it doing? What's the purpose of these kind of messages that don't really feel very good? And so in the school of thought that I come from in terms of psychological research and intervention, really kind of perceives the brain as a survival machine, right? Its whole purpose for being there is to help us survive, help us not die. And so, really, what it spends a lot of time doing is kind of noticing threats in our environment, right? Perceiving what might be out there that could get us, that could threaten us, that could create problems. And basically, what it's trying to do is keep you safe. And so, historically, that was really useful, right? If there were threats that could actually end my life, then I would really want to know about those. Most of the time, for most of us present day in our situation, the threats that we're experiencing don't have that same kind of critical nature. And so our brain doesn't necessarily distinguish from what might feel threatening to what is actually life threatening. And so this becomes a problem, right? We have this brain doing all this sort of nonstop streaming service of all the threats and all the problems and all the messages that it says to keep us in this place of like being safe, right? So if I notice that maybe my brain is criticizing the way that I said something, maybe I had a past experience where I was embarrassed for saying something silly. And so now my brain is just trying to keep me safe and say, don't say it like that. Don't do that. That was stupid because I'm trying to avoid this threat of embarrassment, of maybe feeling socially isolated or maybe feeling an outcast of a group, right? And so these kind of things can then also become a habit. Our brain starts to get in this pattern of noticing things and then telling us these repeat messages in order to try to keep us in this place. And ultimately, unfortunately, what happens in that kind of situation is that it keeps us stuck, right? We don't get to go anywhere because the brain is working to maintain the status quo. And so then our, kind of the efforts we want to make a growth and change, maybe becoming something new or trying something new, often don't happen because our brain is keeping us stuck with these old messages of criticism and judgment, trying to keep us from taking some of these risks. And so, as an example, right? Like if I tell myself that I'm unlovable, then I'm not going to seek relationships because then I don't have to deal with the threat of being rejected or having my heart broken, these kind of situations, right? And so, all too often, what happens is that when we hear these messages, we think they're the truth. What our brain says must be the reality, right? Like if I say that was stupid, then that is stupid, right? And the fact is that's not necessarily true. And more importantly, it's not helpful. It's not helping us become the person we want to be. It's not helping us take the risks and the challenges we want to take so that we can move forward and we can grow as humans. And so part of what we're going to be discussing today is how to manage these voices, some practical tools for what happens and the ways that you can unstick yourself so that you can continue moving in the direction of becoming the person that you want to be, aspiring to the goals that you have for yourself. So, if you would humor me, please. I'm just curious when you think of this word resilience, what comes up for you? And go ahead, please give me something in the chat. Resilience. I know it has a lot of different meanings for folks, different connotations, but I'm curious if anybody has particular connotations, particular thoughts on what resilience might mean for them. Getting up when you fall down. Thank you. That's a great one. Recovery from a failure. Thanks. Able to recover. Yeah. So I think that I was kind of thinking along the same line. So this is the kind of working definition I had for us for tonight is this idea of responding to challenges with a positive mindset, right? And that's kind of embodies both of what, the two of you had shared, right? Getting up when you get down, recovering from a failure and being able to kind of come back with a mindset that, I'm not, all is not lost here, right? I'm able to continue what I want to do. Similarly for well-being, right? Let's just give me a couple of thoughts on well-being. What does well-being mean? I just want to make sure that we're level setting and that we're all kind of on the same page about what these things mean. Anybody have ideas on well-being? Maybe a little harder one to define. No pain. Okay. So physically, right? That we're not experiencing pain, that could be part of it. Physically, mentally healthy, feeling content and satisfied in mind and body. That I really like. That was along the lines of kind of where I was going as well. So this sort of holistic thing, right? It's like a mind and body. There's lots of parts of our experience, and really, I also put this idea of taking care of ourselves, right? There's an action element that can be part of that experience of well-being, or we're taking care of ourselves so that we do feel content and satisfied in mind and body. So we have taken care of ourselves toward this healthy state, right? A holistic, healthy state. So appreciate that. I think that, kind of clear where we're going with this. So I want to move into just our first practical tool here, which is something that I call a mindset reset. And this mindset reset tool is a simple and effective tool for what it's designed to do, right? It's not, if you buy a car and expect to get from the United States to Europe, it's not the right tool. It's not going to be able to take you there. And so, similarly, this is a tool that is designed for some things, but it's not going to solve all your problems. It's not necessarily going to fix a significant crisis. But that said, it does help you get back in the driver's seat when you have some of these distressing thoughts, some of these feelings, some of these self-judgments, and allows you to get back in the driver's seat so that you can continue to move forward, that you can continue to gain some perspective on, what's been going on. And again, to kind of figure out what the actions are you want to take. So, so these are the 4 steps of our mindset reset, and we're going to walk through them together. I want to introduce this hand motion that hopefully would help you remember these 4 different steps so that if you do want to refer back to this hand motion is kind of a really useful way to do it. So if you could put and you can do this with me if you want. I can't see any of you, so you don't have to feel embarrassed, but you put your thumb and forefinger together like this. And so for step number 1, we have awareness, right? And the idea of awareness is here, right? So you're looking through it's maybe a spectacle or a monocle. The idea is just that you're noticing your experience. You're noticing maybe you aren't feeling good or you're distressed or you're getting messages. Rather than ignoring them, we're noticing what's happening. Step 2, which is we move into the acceptance phase, is to turn that kind of finger into like this is like looks a little awkward in my video here, but kind of like the sort of mudra position for a meditation, right? Our hand is open in this kind of meditative stance. And that is where we're kind of doing a grounding practice to be able to kind of get back to kind of down regulate our nervous system and be able to kind of get back to a place where we're, kind of more even keeled. Step 3 is then analysis. So then we're turning that kind of meditation hand over to writing. And analysis is thinking about what am I noticing? What do I experience? What is shifting for me after I've done the grounding practice? And then step 4 is like throwing a dart, right? So that's our action step. So we go from noticing to acceptance to analyzing and then to taking some action. So we're going to walk through those 4 steps today. So I would like to invite you at this point, if you're seated, that's great. If you're not already seated, maybe find yourself a comfortable seat. And if you want to close your eyes, you're welcome to close your eyes. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's also fine. Maybe just find a kind of a fixed point that you can focus on. And I'd like you to call to mind some recent experience in which you felt some degree of discomfort. Maybe you had a conflict with a partner or a roommate or a professor or a parent. Maybe there was some judgment of others that you experienced. Maybe it was judgment of yourself. And we're looking for something that's maybe like a 3 or 4 out of 10, right? This wasn't necessarily a total blowout experience. This is something but maybe there's still some kind of emotional residue that you're still feeling. So thinking through some kind of example of something that happened recently that you can call to mind. And I'd like you to really kind of go back to that place. Think about maybe what the sounds were you could hear, what the words that were exchanged were. Maybe if you noticed any physical sensations during that interaction or experience or event. Really bringing yourself back there. This tool would be something you could do in the moment, but obviously this isn't what's going on right now. So this is why we're kind of recalling this situation. And you can always do that too. And so for our purposes today, we're doing this recall. This is an also helpful tool to use in the moment. So once you've gotten this kind of idea and really come back into this place, we're going to move into step 2, right? So we've gone from noticing this like situation and noticing this experience of discomfort to our acceptance. We can't change this experience. It's here for us. This is what it is. And so we're going to use this grounding practice to really just settle in and make some space for this thing to be there. There are 4 different pieces of this grounding practice that I'm going to walk with you through today. You can use all of them. You can use 1 or 2 or 3 of them if you don't want to use all of them. Really, I would invite you to play with it and practice it. The more you practice these kinds of things, the more effective they are when you do go to use them. But it's like any kind of thing where if you practice more when it comes to game time, then you're going to feel like a little more natural experience. So again, we're going to be going through breath, sounds, sensations, and sights, as you can see there on number 2. And we're going to do each one. And if you practice them on your own, you can practice which ones maybe feel better to you or feel more resonant as you're doing it. So we'll start with the breath. I'd invite you to just take a couple deep breaths into your belly. Noticing how that feels as the breath comes in and goes out. Noticing if your breath is feeling shallow or feeling more deep. Notice any changes in temperature that you can feel as the breath comes in or goes out, or the rise and fall of your body as the breath moves in and out. Next, we'll move on to sounds. I'd like to invite you to notice what is the furthest away sound that you can hear. And what's the closest sound you can hear? Are there two other sounds maybe that you could hear? Just noticing the quality of these sounds without judgment. From sounds, we'll move on to sensations. And so that's your physical feeling, noticing how your body is contacting the chair that you're sitting in, noticing if you're feeling any experience of pain or discomfort, noticing your feet on the floor or in your shoes. I'd like to ask you to now to bring your thumb and forefinger back together again and noticing moving them ever so intentionally across each other, noticing the feeling of the ridges of your fingerprints as your thumb and forefinger move across each other. Now, lastly, I'd like to invite you to open your eyes and take a look around. Notice what's in the space where you are. Notice the colors, the variation of colors, shadow, light, any other sights that maybe you didn't recognize earlier. Now, come on back. We're going to move on to step three, which is our analysis. So, what has shifted for you? And I'd love to hear as you kind of come back, if you think about this experience that we had recalled to mind after taking some time to ground, what shifted for you? What do you notice about that experience? Feel free to drop it in the chat. I don't see anything coming through, but I'm hoping that that did feel like there was some shifting for you and that you noticed something different. And maybe now consider what would you like to do differently, right? What might change for you? Is there a repair that you'd like to do? Is there something you need to do for yourself? So this is a tool that can be used anytime, right? If you want to simplify it as much as possible, just doing the kind of a finger rubbing type thing together, it can be done in your pocket while you're driving. It can be done anytime that you're starting to feel some of this discomfort coming up. This may be in an interview process. It may be when you're getting a notice that you didn't get a job. It could be any time that you're, kind of after you've left the university that you're feeling any type of distress. It can be a really useful tool to then kind of reset and regroup and figure out what you want to do next that helps you be continuing to move toward this person that you want to be in the future. Um, So from for mindset reset, kind of 1B here, I put a few just little practical tools that I think can also be helpful in creating some distance from our distress. These are little tools again that can be really useful the more you practice them. So the three different things here are, little tricks that we can use. So number one is when we notice ourselves feeling something, right? Maybe the message is, I'm unlovable, I'm an idiot, I'm a loser, I'm whatever, not nice thing that our brain is telling us, that we can put this phrase in front to say, I notice that my mind is telling me that I'm unlovable. It creates a little bit of a different relationship with that message and gives us a little bit more space and a little bit more flexibility to then kind of make some moves for what we want to do next, right? So instead of saying I'm unlovable and having that be the truth, then I can notice, well, I'm going to take a step back and say, is this really helping me? Is this really the kind of thing that I want to be telling myself right now? Similarly, in number two, there's my blank story again, right? There's my I'm not good enough story. There's my I always screw it up story. Being able to name that and notice that, and then almost have a sense of humor about it. There I go again, telling that same story. Maybe you have a journal and you want to write that story down. You could crumple it into a little ball and put it in your drawer, right? That could be a thing to do, right? To really say, this isn't serving me right now. This is something I'm going to put to the side. We're not necessarily trying to control these thoughts, right? Because this is like this streaming service that is always on. But being able to say, this isn't helping me right now, and it's not something I really have time to entertain. And then lastly, to think about this idea of an ocean waves metaphor, right? So this could be a visualization that you do. I recognize that may not be accessible for all people and the way our different brains work. So fortunately, even have access to going to the ocean or looking at the ocean, right? And to think about the waves coming in, going out, coming in and going out. Sometimes they wash really high up the beach. Sometimes they look big and scary. And sometimes they're little and mellow. And similarly with our thoughts, right? They come in and then they go out, and they come in and they go out. And sometimes they wash over us and we get sort of stuck or absorbed in them. Sometimes they seem more big and scary, and other times they don't seem as scary. But really, we can recognize that we don't have to be wet, right? We can take a step back. We can stand further back on the beach, recognize what is happening here with these thoughts, and not have to engage with them in such a direct way. Cool. I'm going to pause there. Any questions on this mindset reset stuff? Anything that would be helpful for us to clarify before we move on to our next tool? Okay, I'm going to keep going then. So, tool number two, we're going to talk a little bit about storytelling. So, this is, continues to be in line with the themes of tonight of like how our brains work and kind of making them taking advantage of the features of our brain, right? So our brain is often telling us stories about ourselves, about other people, about anything and everything. It's judging constantly and always sort of streaming these stories to us. And so, one additional tool that can be helpful is to, if it's telling us stories that aren't helping us, is to feed it some content that we want, right? To feed it some things that we would like to spend time hearing it say, and give it some information about things that we'd like to hear back. So that can be a really helpful shift for just feeding some different content to our brain. So we're going to go through another exercise. So I ask you now to have something you can jot some notes down with. So that's fine if it's digital, if you have a phone or a computer there. If you have paper and pen, that's also great. And we're going to go through just a brief exercise here. Well, we'll see how brief it is, I guess, ultimately, but we're going to go through this exercise of just writing a heroine or hero story for ourselves, where we are noticing opportunities to sort of recast a story in a different light. And so, what I'd like you to do, like I said, is to kind of get your whatever the thing is that you can jot some notes down on. And we're going to go through this together. So, I'm going to give you each prompt in the chat if that's helpful. You can obviously see them there as well on the slide. And I'd ask you just to kind of fill in these blanks. So there was a time when I felt blank. So that ideally, right, in this kind of situation we're talking through, is some time when I didn't feel good about something. Maybe I felt like I was comparing myself and I wasn't good enough to the other people in my class. because they all understood the material much more quickly than I did, for example, or they all got better grades than I did, or they've all got internships and I don't have any prospects. So there was a time when I felt blank. And I'll give you just a moment here to kind of fill that in. And if it takes a little while to kind of come up with what you want, that's fine. You're going to get these slides, right? Ron, they'll get the slides. Yeah. So you'll get a copy of these slides, and you're welcome to, kind of do this later too, if it's feeling challenging to come up with some stuff in the moment. Um, but number two is, the second line of our story is I realized I couldn't keep blank. And so this is whatever we're doing that's keeping us stuck, right? I realized I couldn't keep isolating myself from others. I realized I couldn't keep beating myself up about this. I realized I couldn't keep whatever it is that's the behavior or the thoughts that we're having that's keeping us stuck and not allowing us to move forward in the direction that we want. Okay, the next line of your story. Instead of shrinking away, I decided to. That could be any number of things, right? What do you want to decide to do differently than what you're doing now? What's a risk you could take that feels attainable and not too scary, but will help continue to move you in the direction you'd like to move? Okay, line number four. Through this, I discovered that I blank. So, what changes? What do you notice might shift about the way you perceive yourself, the way you talk to yourself, the way you notice yourself being in the world? So this could be any number of things. I discovered that I can follow through even when I thought I couldn't. I discovered that I could build the kind of relationships that I want. I discovered that I could get the job that I intended to get. I discovered that I could successfully interview and really share who I am and what I have to bring to the table. Okay, line five. Because I showed up this way, blank changed. Maybe that's your attitude. Maybe that's the way you perceive yourself. And maybe it's something else that kind of more structurally changes in your life. Maybe it is the way that you move forward. Maybe it is the job that you have. Maybe it is any number of things. So something might change. And our last line of our story, I am now the kind of person who blank. So I'd like to ask again what this experience has been like, if anybody's willing to share just what they noticed about kind of doing this, if anything particular came up for anyone. Thanks, Precious. I love that. A little more hopeful and proud of yourself. Give another moment if anybody has other thoughts that they'd like to share about that experience. So this is just one kind of exercise, but there's lots of ways that you could do this, right? This could be, oh, great. Oh, thank you, Ron. Yes, perfect. It can be an aspirational thing, right? It doesn't have to be that we're doing this in the moment. It can be something that we're working toward. And that's, I think, a great segue into what I wanted to share more about is this is the kind of stuff we want to feed our brain. This is the kind of stuff that we want to help shape how we want to move forward in the future. And so while this is one exercise, right, that you could use, there's a lot of ways that you could do this. And so having a journal where you kind of jot down inspirational quotes could be a helpful way to do it. Using a vision board. A lot of people put up things with like whatever it is that they want, whether it's a particular type of job and things about the industry or the type of relationship they want to have. There's a way to kind of get that out and looking at it. You can do that digitally, you can do that physically, right? There's lots of ways that you can do that. You can put sticky notes on your mirror in your bathroom that say whatever kind of nice messages you want about who you want to be, how you want to continue to move forward in the world. And so feeding your brain more of this kind of information so that the stories that are coming out of it can really be ones that support you and help you in moving in the direction that you want to move. Okay, cool. I'm going to move on to our third and final practical tool. And I know that there have been some, if you've been attending this series, there have been some discussions around networking and attending networking events, mentoring and building a mentoring group or mentoring relationships. And I think those have been really great content. In terms of community and what I'm talking about today, specifically, I'm thinking about a community that can support you as you're moving out of the university setting, because what you are moving toward can be really challenging, right? I think ultimately we have a lot of challenges before us, right? This is like a hard time for hope in general. And then when you think about what your experience of like leaving the university and the institution that you've been a part of for so many years and moving on to a situation where you may have not as many supports and not as many resources available to you, it feels maybe you're a little more on your own. Having a community around you can really help bolster some of that and help you navigate that in a way that maybe feels more supportive. And so these are the three things that I wanted to offer you in terms of different thoughts, or maybe a little bit adjunctive to some of the things that I know have been parts of the other content of these discussions. And so, number one is finding what I call a booster buddy, right? This is going to be somebody that you have an intentional conversation with who's maybe in a similar phase than you. Maybe they're also graduating. Maybe they don't have a job yet. Maybe they're in a job hunt or job seeking sort of situation, and having an intentional conversation about how you could support each other. Having somebody like this who you can be accountable to, who can help you get up when you maybe have fallen down, if you have not getting the interviews you want, found so many jobs that you've applied for, and none of them seem to be calling you back, right? Having somebody else who is also in a similar process can be a really helpful tool so that you can continue to feel like you want to move forward, because it's hard, right? You are putting this in a situation where you're vulnerable, you're putting yourself out there. They don't usually share anything about themselves, and then they have all the power to reject you. That is a challenging emotional situation. And so recognizing that and finding some ways to bolster yourself as you're going through that process can be really helpful. Um, so that's what I mean by a booster buddy. Number two is online resources for similar types of things, right? Online communities for job seekers on Reddit, on Discord. LinkedIn to a certain degree. Jobcase.com also has some similar types of things where there are really resources available for job seekers, not just like how do you craft a resume, how do you prepare your interview skills, but kind of have more of that emotional tone of like, how do I keep doing this? How do I keep going through this? How do I think through this situation where I'm not getting the calls back that I want to, or I'm not getting the jobs that I want to, and being able to continue to support yourself emotionally, being in a community type of setting. The last one is hosting a party. So, this could be getting some drinks or some snacks with your friends who are doing similar things, right? Sometimes going through the motions of doing all this and getting applications out the door, retooling your resume for each application, writing a cover letter, et cetera, that can be a daunting task. Maybe it's a situation where you could invite some friends over and you do it together. Everybody brings their laptop. People get together. It can be fun. It can be funny. You could help each other answer the questions that may be coming up in these application processes. You could take a look at each other's resume and offer feedback. And similarly, if somebody's got interviews coming up, right? You could be asking them questions, helping them prepare, and vice versa, right? So you have this kind of community experience where you are able to support each other and able to kind of walk through some of these things that can maybe feel pretty isolating when you're doing it on your own. So those were the three things in terms of kind of building a community. I don't have a specific activity to ask you to go through with building a community, but I think that some of these things where you're thinking about how can I do this where I don't feel alone, where I have some support and I can walk through this with some other folks could be a really useful thing for you to think about. Okay. I'll pause there again. I guess I didn't pause after the last one for questions, but I'll pause after those two. Any questions coming up for folks? Yeah, great. Okay, so the question in the chat says, I really love the idea of the ocean wave metaphor as a de-stressing tool. Could you share some more thoughts on this notion of connecting our mental awareness with nature? Yeah, so there are a variety of things that you could consider, and I think, and I'm going to try to answer this question as directly as I can, but there's lots of research, lots of evidence that supports the benefit of being outdoors, looking at things that are green and natural in terms of our mental health, right? And so we have lots of spaces where you could consider spending some time on campus if you're still on campus, right? There are lots of places like even nearby campus, right? The glider port has a really pretty views over the ocean. The eucalyptus grove and kind of whatever that would be the north side of campus is also a really nice quiet place to go and kind of experience a little bit of the natural environment. And then any green space is also okay, right? There's lots of really nice, pretty green spaces on campus too to sit and enjoy and just kind of have some time to sit quietly and be in a natural environment. I think that that's what the question is getting at. Um, but maybe correct me if I'm wrong there, answering your question, if there was something else you wanted me to kind of touch on. Yeah, okay. I'll say thank you as like a thumbs up on that. So absolute, I'm a huge supporter of that. If you can spend your time and it's available to you to go hiking on the weekends, be anytime you can get into nature, I think is really a really great opportunity to do so. Okay, so this slide, I wanted to just share a few quotes with you that I think kind of represented for me each of the three steps that we were talking through tonight, or three tools that we were talking through. So our first tool tonight was the mindset reset. So this was an opportunity when we're hearing messages or experiencing things that are distressing to be able to reset, wipe some, essentially we're kind of like wiping the fog off our glasses, right? It's not necessarily changing our whole environment, but allowing us to see a little bit more clearly. And the quote for that I chose for that is that comparison is the thief of joy. So when we're stuck in this place where we're fused with our thoughts, where we're taking our thoughts as the truth, and we're comparing ourselves to others, and we're taking all this negativity, we're really giving up our joy and our experiences and opportunities for joy. And so that's one that I would really kind of encourage you to practice on a regular basis and see what comes up for you and see if it can be helpful for you. The second one is related to our storytelling and the stories that we, kind of share with ourselves and that we're feeding our brain. And this quote is whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And really, again, speaking to the power of the stories that were going on in our head and how we want to frame those stories and what kind of things we want to be telling ourselves so that we can move forward in the direction that is most fulfilling to us. And then the third one was our practical tool was building a community. And so the quote I chose for that was, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so really, again, speaking to that idea of having a community that you can seek support from. Graduating, as I said earlier, graduating is a scary thing. It's a scary prospect. And it's particularly a hard time to feel hope, right? There's lots of things happening throughout the world, both nearby and far away, that are scary, that are challenging, that are violent in many cases, right? And so feeling hope and feeling that sense of overwhelm can be a really challenging thing to overcome. And so, while that may be the case, graduating from the university can also be a tremendous opportunity for growth and learning new things about ourselves and opportunities to grow in new ways that maybe we hadn't considered before. And so, my hope for all of you as you're sort of rounding out your time at UCSD is that you can really be kind and patient with yourselves and utilize some of these tools to support your mental well-being and your mental resilience, and really work on aligning your actions with becoming the kind of people that you want to be and living out the values that are most important to you. And so, those are my hopes for you as you move forward. And I just really appreciate your time tonight. I'm happy to take any additional questions now if there's anything else that comes up for you.